In this video, we'll begin creating enemies for our first-person shooter game. We'll do this by creating the enemy object, which will be a robot character. Additionally, we'll make the enemy take damage when shot. When the enemy takes enough damage, it will be destroyed. After it's destroyed, the enemy will respawn. Let's begin by designing and building our enemy. The basic construction of the enemy is it has a cylindrical body and a cube-shaped head. Additionally, the head has a couple of weapons mounted inside of it. Let's begin by creating an empty game object that will act as a container for all the pieces of our robot. We'll name this object enemy. I'll also move this container upwards a bit so that we aren't trying to design our enemy while also on top of other objects in the scene. Next, let's make the body. We'll go game object, 3D object, cylinder, and we'll drag the cylinder to be a child of the enemy. Next, we'll rename the cylinder to be body. Now we'll begin designing the head. We'll go game object, 3D object, cube. We'll also make the cube be a child of the enemy, and we'll set its position to x0, y1, z0. This places the head at the top of the cylinder. I'd like this head to be a little bit of a different shape, so we'll change the scale. We'll set the scale to x of 1.5, y of 0.6, and z of 1.5. Now it's flatter. Now that the head's in position, we'll create the two weapons that are inside the head. These will be cylinders that face forward. We'll create a new cylinder, make it a child of the head cube. We'll rotate it to be 90 degrees on the x-axis. We'll set the scale to 0.15 on the x-axis, 0.25 on the y-axis, and 0.4 on the z-axis. When I move that ahead, it's now the right shape for the design that I have in mind. We'll set its position to be negative 0.3, 0, 0.5. This will be the left weapon, so I'm going to rename this object weapon left. We can now duplicate this to create the right weapon. Right-click and duplicate. You can also press Ctrl-D or Command-D on a Mac. Let's rename this new weapon to weapon right and place it on the robot's right-hand side by moving it to the left. We could drag it, or we could change its position from negative 0.3. Notice how it's changed slightly to negative 0.2999 because of floating point precision issues, but we can ignore that. Let's change it from the negative to positive just by deleting the negative sign. Now, the right weapon is on the right-hand side of the robot. Lastly, we'll change the cube's name from cube to head, just to keep things organized. Our model is now complete, and it's time to begin creating materials. We'll go to our materials folder, right-click, and choose material. We'll use 3 different materials for the enemy. One will be for the body, one for the head, and one for the 2 weapons. Robots are typically made out of metal, so we'll use a shiny material. Additionally, because this is for the enemy, I want to use a bright, threatening color, and red will work well for that. The body will be a dark red. The head will be a brighter red to draw attention to the higher point and basically get the player's focus on that. And the weapons will be a yellow color to add some contrast. First of all, we'll make the enemy body material by naming our new material enemy body. We'll set the metallic property to 0.8. This means that it will take more of its color from the surrounding environment, which is true for metals. We'll also change the smoothness from 0.5 to 0.8 as well. This means that it will be much more glossy, but not so glossy that it is completely reflective. We'll set the albedo color to a dark red. Something like this will do. You'll want to play around with your own values. With our enemy body material done, let's duplicate it by pressing Command-D or Control-D on a PC, and we'll name this new material enemy head. The only difference is we'll change the albedo color to a lighter red. Finally, we'll duplicate this one more time and name this enemy weapon. Rather than using a red color, we'll change this to a yellow color. There we are. Next, we'll attach these materials to the object. We'll drag the enemy body onto the body, head onto the head, and the weapon onto each of the weapon objects. Our game will feature multiple copies of this enemy, so we should make it a prefab. Go to the Assets folder, and we'll drag the enemy object from the Hierarchy pane into the Assets folder, making it a prefab. We can now move this a little further down so that we can examine it from close up. Let's play the game. Here it is. Looking pretty good. The next step will be to make this robot take damage. We're going to write a script that is responsible for managing the health of this object, as well as keeping track of when it has received damage. We'll add a script to the enemy object, the high-level container. Click Add Component, and type damage taking. Let's open the script. The damage taking script that we're writing will apply to both the enemy and also to the player. It will keep track of the total amount of health that the character or object has. It will also have a function that can be called by other parts of the game, such as by the weapon. This function will reduce the amount of current health the object has, and if this drops below 0, then the object will be destroyed. We'll first of all define the maximum amount of health that this object can have by adding a new variable, public int max health, and we'll default that to 3. We'll also create a property called current health. Current health will have an overridden setter which will detect if current health has dropped below 0, and if it has, it will call a function called die, in which we'll handle all of our destruction and respawning logic. To make this, we'll first of all create a backing field for the property by saying int underscore current health. Underscore indicates that it's a behind the scenes thing. We'll also create a property called current health. Notice the lack of an underscore. We'll then add curly braces and add a getter and a setter. The getter will simply return the value of underscore current health. The setter will first of all update underscore current health with the value that was provided. It will then check to see if current health is below 0 or equal to 0. If that's the case, we'll call a function called die. We'll add the function called die now, but we won't add any logic to it yet. We'll add some more later. Public void die. In the start function, we'll first of all set current health to max health. This means all objects will begin with their maximum amount of health. We'll also add a function called take damage. We'll make this public so that other things can call it. Public void take damage. This will take a parameter, an int called amount. For convenience, we'll make it so that it has a default value of 1. This means that you can call take damage with no parameters, and it will receive the amount as 1. All this function does is it will say current health, the property, notice the lack of an underscore, goes down by amount. This will automatically make the die function get called if this results in current health becoming lower or equal to 0. Let's save the script, and we'll go back to our basic weapon script. In the fire function, we're detecting whether or not we hit something. Currently, all this is doing is creating an impact effect. What we should now add is some logic that detects whether the thing that we hit has a damage-taking component, and if it does, we'll call the take damage function. So, we'll say var damage equals hit info, remember that's the variable that contains information about the hit, dot collider dot get component in parent. That is, we want it to look first of all at the object and see if it has a damage taking. If it doesn't, it'll go one level up to its parent and see if it has damage taking, and so on until it reaches the top level and either succeeds or can't find it there either and gives up, returning null. So get component in parent, damage taking. If damage is not equal to null, that is, we successfully found a damage component, then we'll call damage dot take damage. Notice we aren't providing a parameter, so it will default to 1. Let's temporarily add some logic to the die function. We'll make it vanish from the scene completely by saying destroy game object. We'll save our work, and we'll go back into Unity. Let's test it. Play the game. We'll aim at our robot, and we'll shoot it 1, 2, 3 times, and it vanishes.